You can be on either side, and you can either be lying on the side like this or sitting up, and I will show you both. We're going to stretch across the front of the hip flexor and the quad muscle of the leg. Again, everything down here is connected. So I'm going to reach my top leg back, grab it with my hand. If you can't grab it with your hand, that's fine. You can loop a leash or any kind of rope, a yoga strap around it. If you have a pants on, you can grab your pant leg. Any of those things is fine. I like doing it this way because for most of us, it's a little easier to reach our leg lying down. So the position of the bottom leg doesn't matter so much. However, you can support yourself. Once you get a hold of your top foot, pull it toward your bottom and then gently push this part forward. So that's where we're looking for the stretch. And I can really feel this. My hip flexors tend to get very tight. For a lot of us, that's an area that is connected to some low back pain. You can also come all the way up to seated this way. And if you can balance yourself. So if this is more comfortable for you to do it like this, you can play around with that and see where do you get a better stretch. Again, it might feel different, not only different in different bodies, but different days, depending on what kind of activity you've been doing. All right, so hold a few more breaths here. This can feel like a really nice one to hold for a little bit longer, maybe even a whole minute rather than 30 seconds, but you know how to time that once you have timed your breath to 30 seconds. And then I'll shift up, shift to the other side, and I'll show you both of those options on the other side as well. So lying down, I like to prop up on my elbow, but you could also be all the way down if that's preferable to you. I prefer to grab the ankle actually than the foot, because then I'm not overly torquing the foot. So when I'm propped up here, I find that I have actually a little bit more control over my lower leg. I can push a little bit forward at my hip. I like this stretch a little better. And actually this is a nice bonus. I'm feeling it in my side, my oblique muscles, even a little bit back to my QL muscle on my back. That's another area that can be a trigger in back pain. Or again, you can sit up and do some version of this stretch wherever you are. Remember, this is a functional practice, which means we're looking for a feeling in our bodies. We're not looking for how the pose looks. All right, so a few more breaths. And then you can release that leg. I'm going to shift around again to seated on, actually maybe I'll shift around. Seated on my heels, and I'm going to give you two options here. So the one option is to come into child's pose. If you feel like, okay, that was a lot of work to warm up and you're ready for a child's pose rest, that's totally fine. Open your knees to whatever extent is comfortable. Hinge forward from your hips. You could do child's pose just like this with a little bit of a hinge. You could have more of a hinge. Rest your head on your arms. You can grab that blanket. So any of those versions is fine. Or if you like that front hip flexor stretch and want a little more there, you can lean back and then lift your hips and bottom off your heels any amount. You'll very likely feel that in the front of your thighs and your hip flexors a little bit more. So it's kind of an extra bonus stretch in that front area. And then you can breathe. And we'll see if we can hold this for about 30 seconds. Or you might be holding your child's pose during that time, tuning in with your breath, giving yourself pause and rest, another really important part of the practice. All right, and then gently let that down. So now we're going to come to lying on our backs, and this is where you will need your prop, either your blanket or your firm cushion. I'm taking my blanket that is folded. Usually yoga blankets are folded in about a rectangle. I don't know about every other blanket. I'm going to take that and make it a smaller rectangle, and then I'm going to make it a little, I would say square, but it's not really a square, but more like yoga block size. So I have maybe 5 or 6 inches of height, but it's really a firm height. And that's about the same thing that I would get if I was using my cushion as well. The height doesn't matter so much. Whatever works for you, as long as it feels firm. This is going to be under your sacrum, just under your waistline area. So I'll lean back. And then once you're lying back, you'll push into your feet just enough so that you can take that prop and slide it right under that area. So hopefully your prop is soft enough to feel comfortable. We're looking for that little bit of height, a little bit of lift to our hips. If it's not comfortable, if it feels like it's digging into your waist, most likely it needs to move closer down to your feet. So you might slide it a little bit more under your sacral area, that's at the bottom of your tailbone, toward your feet. Then as long as you feel comfortable and stable, draw your knees in toward your chest. This might cause you to shift around on the blanket. Maybe you'll need to readjust. Knees into chest. And with knees into chest, we'll practice wave breathing. Wave breathing is simply moving our pelvis a little bit, kind of tucking and untucking as we breathe. So as I breathe in, you'll see my knees move away from me as my breath flows in. My pelvis starts to point down toward the ground, or my tailbone starts to point down to the ground. And then as I exhale, I tuck my tail, bring my knees in. So this is wave breathing. We'll do this a few times. Inhale, knees away. So my arms come to straightening. I have to be straight. Exhale as I bend my arms, draw my knees closer. Scoop or tuck my tailbone, round my tailbone, however you want to think of it. A few more times like that. And just like we did with cat-cow, because you'll notice this is sort of a similar movement, it's just localized more to your pelvis rather than your whole spine. If there is an area, one version of this or the other, that feels like that's the stretch you need today, then stay in that position and hold. And maybe you hold for 30 seconds. Maybe you hold for 1 or 2 breaths. Keep one knee into your chest. Stretch the other leg out. So you might just place that foot on the floor, or you might stretch it out long, and that's going to move that stretch more to the front. Again, that hip flexor, that psoas area on that side. For the leg that you have bent, actually don't even have to hold it. If you can comfortably reach your leg, you might be holding somewhere on the thigh, on the shin, wherever is comfortable. We can do a little bit of a movement here, gentle circle. And let's hold here for a few breaths. Sometimes when we're feeling things, we're kind of have this tendency in our society, right, to rush through things, right, to rush through whatever sensation is there, to move on to the next thing. Sometimes just pausing and holding is the best thing we can do for ourselves. And we'll stay here. We'll take the leg a little bit across the body. We're not going into a twist or a rotation. I'm just drawing my knee maybe 3, 4, 5 inches so that some of the stretch comes a little bit more into this area, the outer hip, the IT band, the abductor area. And you might notice it whether your knee is less in toward your chest, more in toward your chest. So you can certainly play around with finding the position like, oh yeah, that's my sweet spot. That's where I feel it. And then holding there. 1 or 2 more breaths. Draw that knee back through center. Draw the other knee back in. Hold them both for a moment. Maybe you make some big circles with both of your knees. Maybe it's more like a H shape. Move around a bit. And then keep your second knee toward your torso. Other leg stretches out long. And you'll see I have a little mini bend in my bottom leg. That's where I feel comfortable. I still feel plenty of stretch, plenty going on here. And we hold. Maybe you have a little gentle movement in here in the hip socket. That's where our hands are, like our friends in these poses, because our hands can help us with some of that mobility, to get some of that movement and range of motion. It's a sense of more of a passive stretch when we hold without our hands, when we just use our muscles. That's an active stretch. Both are good. We're going to include both types in our practice. And then we'll do the same thing on this side where we draw the knee in a little bit towards center. Just enough that maybe I reach and hold on the outside of the leg and I feel that stretch move more toward the outside of the hip. And remember that if you choose not to hold, that's fine too. You can do these poses without holding on. One more breath here. All right, as you exhale, set your legs down